Welcome to a very special bonus episode of Attached Together, and it's a bit of a different one. As usual, you can gain your CPD certificate and resource back by visiting optimahealthservices.co.uk or looking at the show notes. So I said today's a bit of a different one, and I'm joined by Christopher Dines. Christopher is an author, a seasoned mindfulness practitioner, coach, and a former DJ. He has published 8 books on mindfulness and addiction, including The Kindness Habit, which he co-authored with Dr Barbara Mariposa, a distinguished medical doctor. Christopher's books have featured forewords by renowned figures such as Rudolph E. Tanzi, PhD of Harvard Medical School, and the late John Bradshaw, #1 New York Times best-selling author at the Meadows, Arizona. Today we are going to be speaking about MVP. So it's great to have you here, Christopher. But obviously my first question is going to be, what is MVP? What do you mean?
Thanks, Darren. Yes, I'm delighted to be here today. Really appreciate the invitation to join you. And MVP, Mindfulness Burnout Prevention. It was first based on a book that was published back in 2015. At the time, the focus was really on assisting mental health clinicians to navigate burnout prevention, and Dr Barbara Mariposa wrote the foreword to that. She's a medical doctor, and since 2015 MVP has turned into a service provider providing specialised resources and coaching to therapists and psychologists who are at risk of burnout and emotional fatigue. And literally next month, actually June of this year, 2026, the second edition of Mindfulness Burnout Prevention will be published. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. There's so many bits that you said there that I want to ask more about. So it's where we go first. Let's start at the beginning, I guess. How did you even get into this? Where did you start?
Right, so I'm in recovery. In my teens, I had substance misuse issues with alcohol and various other mind and mood altering substances. And what happened is that just after my 21st birthday, so it was August of 2004, having had attending mutual aid support groups around substance misuse issues, I basically hit a rock bottom, a deep emotional rock bottom, and I'd stopped drinking alcohol and using those substances. And then I was introduced at mutual aid groups to the idea of just being present. So that there was no real talk of mindfulness in that sense, although that's what it was. There was a lot of talk about meditation, being present, and that was to help me in my recovery. And so I really sort of grabbed onto that in a sense. And at the time, Darren, I was working in the electronic music industry. By then I was a full-time electronic music dance DJ, and I had an independent record label at the time as well. And I was hosting nights. I was covering the bills in that sense, whilst meditating and attending support groups, as I said, and receiving some therapy as well to help me with my emotional wounds at the time. So meditation was really on the forefront. And then, so about my 4th year into recovery, I decided that I really wanted to explore what it would look like carving out a career in the wellness field. And mindfulness came into that. And I was also life coaching at the time as well. So this was around 2008, 2009. And then in 2010, I'd garnered some interest from some sales companies in the City of London, and they were really interested in how mindfulness could help with regard to stress reduction. So if you think of John Kabat-Zinn, and there are a few CEOs in small independent companies that were meditating themselves, and they wanted to find a sort of more holistic approach to help their company. So I actually came through this working in the city. It was then around 2 to 3 years after that treatment centres were quite interested in how this could work. And so I started working in various treatment centres, training not just their clients but their staff. So there was ECR, that was in East Anglia. There was another treatment centre in Luton called Rekindling. It was a small treatment centre, and then the Recovery Hub, and then that led on to other, for example, it's now called Harbour Clinic. It used to be called Ad Counsel, and that was one client at a time approach. The first actually in the UK. Paul Flynn, to CEO of that company. So that's how I got into sort of mindfulness. Mindfulness Burnout Prevention itself, as I said, that was founded in 2015, sort of in between that period working in mental health.
You were so young. The parent in me is like hearing the number 21 and being so young and having, discovering so much at that young age and doing the work on yourself. Yeah, that's a lot to have taken on board, and to then have used it all in such a positive way and to spread that out to people. Really impressed by that, Christopher. Like, there's no two ways about that. It's highly impressive. I'm just thinking about, I remember when I practice mindfulness daily. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I went on like a small course for it and did some learning and went to a... But that's far more recent. I mean, back when you were looking at starting, mindfulness really wasn't on people's radar, was it?
It's I really appreciate your feedback, and it's. I noticed that mindfulness became sort of a buzzword in mental health and beyond that around sort of 2013, 2014, and you had quite a few apps sort of being released, like Headspace, and so there were people that were around it that were doing it. As I said, when I started meditating, I just did it really for my own mental health. I joined mutual aid support groups, and I wasn't drinking anymore, so I had to find other ways to sort of tune into my senses in a healthy way and to be present and to experience more calm. So that's why I was really drawn to meditation. As I said, back then I didn't really know the term mindfulness, but I was practicing it. No. The word came.
Doing it.
Conscious breathing was something that was talked about at those groups back then. Being present. So yeah, that's what comes to mind.
It sounds like a way of life for you rather than just a buzzword and something to do. It's a way of being and who you are. I'm wondering then. So the MBP, how does that fit in? Where does that evolve to, Christopher?
Yeah, so MBP, at first the focus was sort of mental health clinicians, and I was running various workshops with he's now a retired CBT and EMDR therapist, Mark Cambrook, and we literally just put his newsletter out via the MBP newsletter. He was a guest editor, and I know that you and Joe will be have got your guest piece coming out next month as well. And so I was working with him at the time. He was based in East Anglia, and he gave me some really good information, and he was very supportive back then. But what's happened then is that we sort of fine-tuned it and realised that that therapists and psychologists are at risk as well. And having worked in mental health clinics and private rehabilitation centres and being part of a clinical team and a therapeutic team as a mindfulness practitioner. So for example, you would have a therapist, a psychiatrist, a mindfulness practitioner, maybe a yoga teacher for the group of clients. What came up a lot was that therapists were experiencing exhaustion, some of whom went on to experience full-blown burnout and had to exit the industry. So that became quite clear, and then with the data and the research, and I like being around therapists and psychologists, and there's just so much information to access and sort of exploring within the conversations, and so that just became clearer and clearer. So MBP is sort of very focused on the needs of supporting therapists and psychologists navigating burnout prevention. Because if someone burns out, then they could be out from anywhere from a year to 18 months. So exhaustion is just, typically if someone calls their GP in the United Kingdom, they might get a fit note for exhaustion, and they could very well be out for 3 months, maybe 6 months, which, typically it's about 3 months. But burnout itself, as I said, that could be well over a year, and that's a part of, there are 3 cylinders to burnout: exhaustion, apathy, and there are very emotional components as well. So it's quite serious, and that's why I'm focused on that with MBP.
So I get, for those who are listening, what are the warning signs? How do people know they're on their way to burnout? So
exhaustion is definitely something to be really mindful of. It happens to us. I've been exhausted before. I've experienced burnout towards the end of my music industry whilst in recovery. And I've experienced exhaustion since then, working in the field. That's definitely a red flag. Something can be done about that. But sometimes, a therapist or a psychologist, they might feel that they can't stop working due to financial obligations. Now, another thing as well is that since the World Health Organization published a definition of burnout back in 2017, 2018, that focuses really on the workplace. But since then, Darren, you've got psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, therapists saying, well, hold on a second, we recognise all of the signs of burnout among people who aren't in the workplace. You know, for example, let's say like a mother, for example, who's got a disabled child and is looking after two elderly parents and is showing the exact same signs as someone in the workplace. So there's a conversation about that at the moment around burnout, but definitely exhaustion. If that's the case, you know, do speak with your GP. Try and get some time off. It's about lifestyle as well. How's your lifestyle working for you? If you're feeling resentful about your work towards your clients, a sense of apathy, that's definitely a red flag. You know, please speak to someone about that. One of the services we provide at Mindfulness Burnout Prevention is a monthly subscription where we have an MBP circle for therapists and psychologists. And there is an online community group as well as monthly coaching calls, which is focused on lifestyle and supporting them to just have clarity, because there's a lot of blind spots. We all have them, but particularly around this. So that's one of the things I would say.
I'm really interested in that, because obviously my next question is going to be, what do we do about it? And you've already started to explain it. Could you give a bit more detail on, if people sign up, what is it they receive and what does that look like?
Yeah, so typically there's a monthly subscription. The founders rate, we've got 6 places where it is £22 a month, and that's for life. So in 10 years from now, you know, that's it's not going to be impacted by inflation. After that, it will go up. What they receive with that is that they'll be on a group with like-minded individuals, therapists and psychologists, navigating burnout prevention. So you've got that genuine community. It's a very clear intention why people are there, and I don't believe anything can really be accomplished without support. So there's a laser focus in that sense. And then as well, Darren, every month there is a coaching call. So it's there are guided meditations, which there's live meditations which I facilitate, sort of various breath work, so to speak, but also focusing on personal and professional goals. And I think that's really important, because if a therapist, for example, is starting to feel apathy, then that tells me, and there's evidence to support, there's a lot of data around it, that they're somewhat feeling trapped in their work. And so having a clear vision around your professional and personal goals can really help to override that and transcend it, rather than feeling sort of stuck and grinding, so to speak.
Yeah. Because this work is hard, and I think that's really important to acknowledge, that we take on so much from others, and we have supervision and stuff, but we need to fill our cups, don't we, to use that well-known analogy. And I can really see the benefit of this, and I'm thinking of colleagues that I've worked with in the past who maybe if we'd all seen, or if they'd seen a warning sign a bit earlier, or if they'd been a bit more preventative, might have avoided the 3 months off work. Maybe actually, that support. And my whole life is about community. My role as a foster carer, I run projects where we get families together. I'm really big on therapy groups. And the online world has just opened everything up, hasn't it? Because it means you can get real, like-minded individuals from anywhere and learn from each other and support each other. And that just feels like really impactful for me.
Absolutely. I the work you're doing as well, creating communities, that's so important. I totally agree with that, Darren. So important.
And there's a lot more isolation now, I feel, because increasingly therapy work takes place online. And maybe you're like me and you have a shed in the garden, or you're in your spare room, or even just the corner of your living room, and you're having your sessions and you shut down the computer. What you no longer have is the chat in the staff room with a colleague afterwards, or even the drive home with some tunes on and decompressing. Actually, there's the gap between work and life just gets smaller and smaller, doesn't it? And so I guess the mindfulness approach is about creating a bit of space.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating space, clarity. Mindfulness traditionally means awareness. So it can be awareness of oneself, one's thoughts, feelings, emotions, bodily sensations, aware of one's environment, being aware of, again, lifestyle. One of the things we recommend is that therapists arrange sort of meetups. Like, for example, you said about, there can be a sense of isolation in a private practice, and that could be counteracted by sort of just meeting up just with other therapists or just with friends, but prioritizing that, at least twice a week, at least once during the week for that time, or taking time out. It really does. It's accumulative, and it makes a difference. It really does.
So I'm just reflecting on the conversation about getting people together and that support and understanding. And I know you're aware that both Joe and I, Optima, are running the retreat in the summer. And that's an overnighter. And the plan is to get therapists together. We've got Linda Cundy speaking. We've got some sound baths. So it'll be a chance, okay, bit of networking, but also that chance to really relax. And we'll definitely be bringing mindfulness practice into that. I feel like that could be a really important space, and somewhere that people could really enjoy that. In terms of the mindfulness and practicing that together, is that important? Does that have any significance of doing it in a group?
Absolutely. It sounds like a great retreat. Yeah, group, as we've talked about. Doing things, being part of a community is so important, and group meditation can be very powerful, can be very supportive, and I think it will go down very well at your retreat. I've looked at the venue as well. It's fantastic. Yeah,
it's stunning. I talk about it every time, but it is where The Wind in the Willows was written and where it's set, and the reeds in the river, it's just so calming, and it just looks gorgeous. I cannot wait. Especially the sun is shining today. If it's like this, it's going to be brilliant. Okay, we're nearing the end of our time. I ask this every single podcast. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there like a takeaway that you'd really like to, if there's one message that listeners are going to take with them, what would that be?
Two things I'd say: it's perfectly acceptable to ask for help and to continue asking for help. And secondly, which you've already touched on and we've talked about, is community. Just to re-emphasize the importance of community. It's so important. So important.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly I agree. I'm so inspired by the work you're doing. Can you remind me, what's your website? Where can we go to find out?
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. So the website, it's Mindfulness Burnout Prevention.com.
Okay, I'll be going on there shortly for sure. Thank you so much for your time today. You're a very busy man. You're heavily in demand. But
thank you, Darren.
Your time is really valued. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Darren.
If you've been carrying the emotional weight of your work lately, feeling stretched, tired, or a little disconnected, you're not alone. That's exactly why we created Restoring Your Secure Base, an attachment-informed therapist retreat designed to give you the space to pause, breathe, and reconnect with yourself, your work, and a community of therapists who truly understand. Across 2 days, you'll step away from the everyday into a calm, restorative environment at the Odney Club near Maidenhead in Berkshire. A beautiful setting that even inspired the world of The Wind in the Willows. We're also honoured that Linda Cundy will be joining us for a special talk and Q&A. The retreat includes workshops, shared reflection, experiential learning, 8 hours of CPD, and restorative experiences and a gong bath. Most importantly, it's a chance to reconnect with yourself and with a community that understands the work you do. To learn more and reserve your place, visit optimahealthservices.co.uk/therapist-retreat.